The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as Griffin Callahan paced the sterile corridor of Portland General Hospital. His steel-toed boots squeaked against the polished linoleum with each step. The smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of fear that seemed to seep from the walls. "Mr. Callahan." A doctor in scrubs approached, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Martinez. Your daughter is stable now, but we need to discuss what happened." Griffin stopped pacing. His calloused hands, permanently stained with machine oil from his metal shop, clenched into fists. She was taking a spelling test. Just a normal Tuesday morning. Then she collapsed. Her heart rate was erratic when she arrived. Rapid, then suddenly slow. "We've run several tests, but her symptoms are—" Dr. Martinez paused, searching for the right word. "Unusual for a healthy 10-year-old. "What kind of unusual?" "Confusion, disorientation, dilated pupils. We're keeping her overnight for observation." Griffin's jaw tightened. 15 years in the Army had taught him to read between the lines. "Can I see her?" The pediatric ward felt smaller than the rest of the hospital. Griffin pushed open the door to room 314 and found Juniper propped up in bed, her blonde hair matted against her pale forehead. Dark circles ringed her eyes, making her look older than her 10 years. "Dad!" Her voice came out as a croak. "Hey, kiddo." Griffin pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down. "How are you feeling?" "Dizzy. Everything keeps spinning." Juniper's small hand reached for his, her fingers ice cold despite the warm room. "Dad, please. We shouldn't go home." The words hit Griffin like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean?" Juniper fumbled for her phone on the bedside table, her movements clumsy and uncoordinated. "Look at this. I took a picture before I got sick." Griffin took the phone and studied the screen. The image showed another phone, Melina's phone, with a text message visible. "When she's gone, you'll be free. Do it right this time." The timestamp showed yesterday, 11:47 p.m. Griffin's blood turned to ice water in his veins. "Juniper, where did you see this?" "Mom left her phone on the kitchen counter this morning." The screen lit up when the message came in. Juniper's grip on his hand tightened. "Dad, what does it mean?" Griffin forced his expression to remain calm, but his mind raced. Years of military training kicked in assess, analyze, act. "It's probably nothing, sweetheart. Maybe something from work." But even as he said the words, Griffin didn't believe them. Melina worked in software strategy, not life-or-death situations. The phrasing was too personal, too specific. "Can we stay at Aunt Darla's tonight?" Juniper's voice was small, pleading. "We'll see, kiddo. First, let's get you better." Dr. Martinez returned with a folder full of test results. "The good news is we don't see any signs of a seizure or heart defect. The concerning news is that we're not sure what caused the episode." "What's your best guess?" Griffin asked. "Honestly, it could be anything from stress to a reaction to something she ate or drank. Children's bodies are sensitive to changes." The doctor glanced at Juniper, then back at Griffin. "Has there been any unusual stress at home? Changes in routine? New medications?" Griffin thought about the text message burning in his pocket. "No, nothing unusual." After Dr. Martinez left, Griffin sat in the darkened room, listening to Juniper's steady breathing as she finally slept. The text message bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The phrasing was wrong. The timing was wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. His phone buzzed. A text from Melina. "How is she? Can't leave work, but thinking of you both." Griffin stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Stable. Staying overnight for observation. Good. See you at home tomorrow. No questions about what caused it. No panic. No demand to leave work immediately and rush to the hospital." For a mother whose child had just collapsed at school, Melina seemed remarkably calm. Griffin pulled up his contacts and scrolled to Kendra Moss. His finger hovered over the call button. Kendra had served 2 tours with him in Afghanistan as an Army medic before getting her degree in microbiology. If anyone could help him make sense of this, it was her. But calling Kendra meant admitting he suspected his wife of something unthinkable. It meant crossing a line he couldn't uncross. Griffin looked at his sleeping daughter and made the call. The Callahan house sat on a quiet street in suburban Portland, its craftsman-style exterior painted a soothing blue-gray that Melina had chosen 3 years ago. Griffin pulled into the driveway the next afternoon, Juniper buckled safely in the passenger seat. She looked better, color had returned to her cheeks, but she still moved slowly, carefully. "Dad, can we have pizza tonight instead of dinner?" Juniper asked as they walked up the front steps. "Instead of dinner? Pizza is dinner. You know what I mean. Instead of whatever Mom planned." Griffin paused with his key halfway to the lock. "Why don't you want what Mom planned?" Juniper shrugged, but Griffin caught the way her shoulders tensed. "Just want pizza." Inside, the house felt normal. Melina's laptop sat open on the kitchen island, spreadsheets visible on the screen. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim. Mail was stacked neatly by the door. Everything exactly as it should be. "Melina," Griffin called out. "Upstairs." Her voice floated down from their bedroom. "How's our patient?" "Better," Griffin replied, but he was already moving toward the kitchen. On the counter sat Juniper's daily smoothie, a purple blend of berries and yogurt that Melina had been making every morning for the past month as part of a healthy eating initiative. Griffin picked up the glass and sniffed. It smelled normal sweet berries with a hint of vanilla. But something nagged at him. He glanced toward the stairs, then poured the smoothie into a mason jar and screwed on the lid. "Griffin, can you come up here?" Melina's voice carried a note of impatience. "Be right there." Griffin slipped the jar into his jacket pocket and headed upstairs. Melina stood in front of their bedroom mirror, adjusting a pearl necklace. At 38, she maintained the kind of polished appearance that came from careful attention to detail. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, and her gray dress looked like it cost more than Griffin made in a week at his metal shop. "How was the hospital?" she asked, not turning around. "Scary. The doctors don't know what caused it. Children get sick, Griffin. It happens." Melina fastened the necklace and finally faced him. "Did they find anything specific?" "No, just that her symptoms were unusual." "Unusual how?" Griffin studied his wife's face, looking for signs of concern, fear, guilt, anything that might give him a clue about the text message. But Melina's expression remained neutral, professional. The same look she wore during her video conferences. "Heart palpitations, confusion, dilated pupils," Griffin said. "Sounds like anxiety to me. She's been under a lot of pressure at school." "What kind of pressure?" "The usual. Tests, social dynamics, growing up." Melina moved past him toward the bedroom door. "I have a client dinner tonight. Can you handle bedtime?" "Of course." Griffin waited until he heard Melina's car pull out of the driveway before returning to the kitchen. Juniper sat at the breakfast bar, homework spread out in front of her. "Is Mom mad at me?" "Why would she be mad at you?" "She didn't hug me when we got home. She always hugs me when I'm sick." Griffin felt that cold sensation in his stomach again. "She's probably just worried about work." "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "That text message on Mom's phone. Who do you think sent it?" Griffin sat down across from his daughter. "I don't know, kiddo. Maybe it was taken out of context." "What does that mean?" "It means maybe it was part of a longer conversation, and we only saw one piece of it." Juniper nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Can we order that pizza now?" After dinner, Griffin waited until Juniper was asleep before calling Kendra. She answered on the second ring. "Griffin, it's late." "What's wrong?" "I need a favor. A big one." Kendra's voice sharpened. "Talk to me." Griffin explained about Juniper's collapse, the hospital, the mysterious symptoms. He didn't mention the text message, not yet. "You want me to test something?" Kendra said. It wasn't a question. A smoothie. Juniper drinks one every morning. Yesterday, she collapsed an hour after finishing it. "Bring it by the lab tomorrow. I'll run a full panel." Kendra, "Yeah, keep this between us for now." Griffin, "If you suspect someone poisoned your daughter." "I don't know what I suspect yet. That's why I need the test." After he hung up, Griffin sat in his workshop behind the house, surrounded by the familiar smell of metal and machine oil. He'd built the shop himself when they first moved in, a place where he could work on custom fabrication projects and clear his head. Tonight, his head felt anything but clear. Griffin pulled out his laptop and logged into their home Wi-Fi network. Melina's devices were all connected to her phone, laptop, tablet. He'd set up the network himself, and he'd been smart enough to keep administrative access. IT took him 20 minutes to configure a secondary router that would mirror all traffic from Melina's devices. If she was communicating with someone about Juniper, he would know about IT. As he worked, Griffin tried to convince himself he was being paranoid. Melina had never shown any signs of wanting to hurt Juniper. She was a devoted mother, involved in school activities, always pushing Juniper to excel academically. But that text message wouldn't leave his mind. When she's gone, you'll be free. Do it right this time. The phrasing suggested this wasn't the first attempt. Jefferson Elementary School buzzed with the controlled chaos of a Wednesday morning. Griffin parked in the visitor lot and made his way to the main office, his steel-toed boots loud against the polished floors. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Monroe, please." Juniper Callahan's teacher. The secretary, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, looked up from her computer. "Of course. She's in room 14. Down the hall. Turn right." Griffin found Ms. Hallie Monroe arranging art supplies on a corner table. At 29, she had the kind of energy that made her seem younger, with curly red hair barely contained by a colorful headband and paint-stained fingers that spoke of hands-on teaching. "Mr. Callahan, how is Juniper feeling?" "Better, thank you. She'll be back tomorrow." Griffin glanced around the empty classroom. "I was hoping we could talk about what happened yesterday, before she collapsed." Ms. Monroe's expression grew serious. "Of course. Please sit down." Griffin folded himself into one of the tiny plastic chairs arranged around a reading table. "Did you notice anything unusual about Juniper yesterday morning?" "Actually, yes." Ms. Monroe sat across from him, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "She seemed disconnected. During the spelling test, she would start to write an answer, then stop and stare at the paper like she'd forgotten what she was doing." "Has this happened before?" "A few times over the past month. Nothing dramatic, just spacing out. I assumed she was tired or distracted." Ms. Monroe paused, choosing her words carefully. "Mr. Callahan, has anything changed at home recently?" "What do you mean?" "Juniper has seemed anxious about pickup time. Last week, when I told the class that parents were arriving, she asked if she could stay after school instead." Griffin felt his chest tighten. "Did she say what?" "When I asked, she said she didn't want to ride home with her mother. She said her mom had been acting weird lately." "Weird how?" Ms. Monroe glanced toward the classroom door, then leaned closer. "Mr. Callahan, I probably shouldn't share this, but Juniper told me her mom had been giving her special smoothies to help her focus better. She said they tasted funny and made her feel sleepy." The classroom suddenly felt too small. Griffin gripped the edge of the plastic table to keep his hands steady. "Did she say anything else?" "She asked if it was normal for moms to watch their kids sleep. Apparently, she's been waking up to find Mrs. Callahan standing in her doorway at night." Griffin's blood ran cold. "How often?" "She didn't say, but it was clearly bothering her." Ms. Monroe's eyes filled with concern. "Mr. Callahan, is everything okay at home?" Griffin forced his voice to remain calm. "We're going through some stress right now. Work pressure, that kind of thing. I'm sure that's all it is." But even as he said the words, Griffin knew he was lying. After leaving the school, Griffin drove to Kendra's lab on the other side of town. The building housed several small biotech companies, and Kendra's microbiology consulting firm occupied a corner suite on the third floor. Griffin found her in the main lab, bent over a microscope. She looked up as he entered, her no-nonsense expression softening slightly when she saw him. "You look like hell," she said. "Feel worse." Griffin pulled a mason jar from his jacket. "Here's that smoothie." Kendra took the jar and held it up to the light. "Purple. Berry-based. That's what Melina tells Juniper. Says it's for focus and energy. I'll run a full toxic screen, looking for anything that might cause the symptoms you described." Kendra set the jar on her workbench. "Griffin, what aren't you telling me?" Griffin pulled out his phone and showed her the text message photo. Kendra's expression darkened as she read. "Jesus Christ, Griffin. It gets worse." Griffin told her about Ms. Monroe's observations, about Melina's strange behavior, about Juniper's fear of going home with her mother. "How long has the smoothie routine been going on?" "About a month. Right around the time Juniper started having problems at school." Kendra was quiet for a long moment, studying the jar. If someone wanted to slowly poison a child, A daily smoothie would be an ideal delivery method. The strong fruit flavors would mask almost any additive. How long before you have results? Give me until tomorrow afternoon. But Griffin, if this comes back positive for anything suspicious, you need to call the police immediately. I will. Promise me. Griffin met her eyes. I promise. That evening, Griffin sat in his workshop installing the monitoring software on his laptop. The secondary router was working perfectly, capturing and logging all network traffic from Melina's devices. Yes, he worked. His phone buzzed with a text from Melina. Working late again. Don't wait up. Griffin checked the timestamp. 8:47 p.m. He opened the monitoring software and pulled up Melina's location data. According to her phone's GPS, she wasn't at the office. She was at an address across town somewhere called Eagle Crest Behavioral Lodge. Griffin had never heard of the place that he did a quick internet search. Eagle Crest Behavioral Lodge appeared to be some kind of private therapy center specializing in alternative approaches to family dynamics and parental relationships. The website was vague, filled with buzzwords like emotional transformation and breaking generational patterns. But what caught Griffin's attention was a photo of the staff. One face looked familiar, though he couldn't place where he'd seen it before. Dr. Ravlin Kessler, the center's founder and lead therapist. Griffin stared at the photo for a long moment, then closed the laptop. Tomorrow, after he got Kendra's test results, he would drive to Eagle Crest and see what his wife was really doing there in the house. Juniper slept peacefully in her bed, unaware that her father sat awake in his workshop, planning to uncover truths that would change their lives forever. The call came at 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, while Griffin was welding brackets for a custom stair railing. He pulled off his mask and answered on the fourth ring. It's not good news, Kendra said without preamble. That Griffin's chest tightened. How bad? I found traces of atropine and digitalis, both plant-based alkaloids. Atropine causes confusion, dilated pupils, and rapid heart rate. Digitalis affects heart rhythm and can cause fainting spells. Griffin sank onto his workbench stool. How much? Enough to cause symptoms, but not enough to kill. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. It's a careful dosage designed to cause distress without triggering immediate medical intervention. Could it have been accidental? Maybe from contaminated fruit. Griffin, these compounds don't occur naturally in the kind of berries used in smoothies. Someone added them deliberately. The workshop suddenly felt too small. Griffin's hands shook as he set down his welding torch. I need to get Juniper out of the house. Or will you take her? My sister Darla has a ranch outside the city. Juniper loves it there, and Darla won't ask too many questions. What about Melina? I'll tell her Juniper needs some fresh air to recover. Buy me some time to figure out what's really going on. After Griffin hung up, he called Darla from his truck as he drove toward Jefferson Elementary. Griffin, this is a surprise. Don't you usually work until 6? I need a favor, Darla. A big one. Darla Finch had never been one to mince words. At 45, she'd seen enough trauma during her years as an ER nurse to develop a thick skin and a sharp tongue. When she retired to raise horses on 40 acres outside Portland, she'd made it clear that city problems stayed in the city. What kind of favor? She asked. Can Juniper stay with you for a few days? Maybe a week. Of course. What's wrong? Griffin pulled into the school parking lot. I think someone's been poisoning her. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Griffin, that's a hell of an accusation. I know. I'll explain everything when I get there. An hour later, Griffin and Juniper drove through the gates of Darla's ranch. The property sat in a valley surrounded by rolling hills, with a main house, a barn, and pastures dotted with horses. Juniper's face lit up as they parked. Are we staying overnight? She asked. Maybe a few nights. Aunt Darla thought you might like to help with the horses while you recover. Darla emerged from the barn, wiping her hands on a towel. She wore her usual uniform of jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. There's my favorite niece, she said, pulling Juniper into a hug. I'm your only niece. Details. Darla ruffled Juniper's hair. Want to see the new foal? As Juniper ran toward the barn, Darla turned to Griffin. Spill it. Griffin told her everything: the hospital, the text message, the smoothie, Kendra's test results. Darla listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. You're telling me Melina has been slowly poisoning Juniper? That's what the evidence suggests. And you haven't called the police because I need more proof. A single smoothie and a vague text message won't be enough. Melina's smart, well-connected, and she'll have lawyers. Darla was quiet for a moment, watching Juniper pet one of the horses through the fence. What do you need from me? Keep Juniper safe. Don't let Melina take her anywhere. And don't mention the poisoning to Juniper. She's scared enough already. What are you going to do? Find out who sent that text message. And figure out what Melina's really doing at Eagle Crest Behavioral Lodge. That evening, Griffin returned home to find Melina in the kitchen, her laptop open and a glass of wine half empty beside it. Where's Juniper? She asked without looking up. At Darla's. I thought some time with the horses might help her feel better. How long is she staying? A few days. Maybe through the weekend. Now Melina did look up, her eyes sharp. That seems excessive for a simple fainting spell. The doctor said rest and low stress. The ranch is perfect for that. Melina closed her laptop with a sharp click. I would have preferred to be consulted about this decision. You were at work. I didn't want to bother you. My daughter's care is never a bother, Griffin. The conversation felt like a chess match, each of them maneuvering for position without revealing their true strategy. Griffin noticed that Melina hadn't asked about Juniper's current condition, whether she was feeling better or if she missed her mother. I'll drive out tomorrow after work to check on her, Melina said. Actually, Darla asked if we could wait until the weekend. Something about not disrupting the horse's routine with too many visitors. It was a weak excuse, but Melina seemed to accept it. She picked up her wine and headed toward the stairs. I have some work to finish upstairs. After Melina went to bed, Griffin opened his monitoring software. Her phone had been at Eagle Crest Behavioral Lodge again that evening, from 6:15 to 8:30 p.m. 2.5 hours. Griffin pulled up Melina's browser history. Most of it was work-related software development sites, project management tools, client communications. But buried in the middle were several searches that made his blood run cold. Child custody laws, Oregon, proving father unfit parent, PTSD, military divorce cases, emergency protective orders. The searches went back 3 weeks, right around the time the smoothie routine had started. Griffin screenshot everything and saved it to an encrypted drive. Then he dug deeper into Melina's email accounts. Most of her personal emails were mundane shopping confirmations, social media notifications, spam. But in a folder labeled Health and Wellness, Griffin found something that made his stomach drop. Email exchanges with someone named R. Kessler. The same Dr. Ravlin Kessler from Eagle Crest Behavioral Lodge. The emails were carefully worded, but the meaning was clear. The adjustment process requires patience. Children often resist changes to their emotional patterns. We discussed the importance of gradual implementation. Too rapid a change could cause setbacks. Your concerns about generational trauma patterns are valid. The techniques we've discussed will help ensure she doesn't repeat your family's emotional dependencies. Griffin's hands trembled as he read message after message. They were talking about Juniper, about changing her, adjusting her, removing her emotional dependencies. The final email in the chain was from just 2 days ago. If the current approach isn't achieving the desired results, we may need to consider more direct intervention. The custody arrangement we discussed would provide better control over the therapeutic environment. Griffin copied everything to his encrypted drive, then spent the next hour researching Dr. Ravlin Kessler. What he found explained everything. Kessler's psychology license had been revoked 5 years ago in California for unethical practices involving vulnerable patients and promotion of scientifically unsupported therapeutic techniques. He'd been running unlicensed therapy centers ever since, moving from state to state when authorities caught up with him. His specialty seemed to be convincing parents that their children needed emotional restructuring to break generational patterns of weakness and dependency. Griffin found testimonials from former patients, people who'd escaped Kessler's influence and were willing to speak publicly about their experiences. The stories were horrifying. Parents convinced to emotionally abuse their children in the name of strengthening them. Families destroyed by Kessler's manipulative techniques. Point 1. Testimonial stood out. Dr. Kessler convinced me that my son's affection for me was unhealthy dependency that would make him weak as an adult. He taught me techniques to emotionally distance my child for his own good. I nearly destroyed my relationship with my son before I realized what was happening. Kessler preys on parents' fears and insecurities, turning love into a weapon. Griffin's phone buzzed with a text from Darla. Juniper's asleep. She asked when you're coming to visit. I told her soon. Griffin typed back. Tell her I love her. And Darla? Don't let her eat or drink anything that doesn't come directly from you. Understood. Griffin closed the laptop and sat in the dark workshop, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. Melina had somehow connected with Kessler, probably through one of her online searches about parenting or child psychology. Kessler had convinced her that Juniper's normal childhood affection and dependence were problems that needed to be fixed. The smoothie poisoning wasn't meant to kill Juniper, it was meant to make her sick, confused, and emotionally withdrawn. The goal was to break the bond between father and daughter, making Juniper easier to manipulate and control. And if that didn't work, Melina was preparing for a custody battle, using Griffin's military history and PTSD against him. Griffin pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in years, Clay Buchanan, the lawyer who'd help him navigate the VA disability system after his discharge. It was time to lawyer up. Friday afternoon, Griffin parked across the street from Eagle Crest Behavioral Lodge and waited. The building looked like a converted office complex with tinted windows and a small sign that could easily be missed by anyone not looking for IT. At 5:45 p.m., Melina's silver sedan pulled into the parking lot. Griffin had called in sick to his shop and spent the day preparing for surveillance. He'd borrowed a telephoto lens from Orson Webb, a photographer who sometimes contracted with Griffin for architectural metalwork. Orson had asked no questions when Griffin explained he needed to document some personal business. Now Griffin sat in his truck with the camera, feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. But this wasn't fiction, this was his daughter's life. Melina emerged from her car and walked toward the building's entrance. She moved with purpose, like someone familiar with the routine. At the door, she was met by a man Griffin recognized from the website photos, Dr. Ravlin, Kessler himself. Griffin snapped photos as they talked briefly outside, then disappeared into the building. At T6:15, Griffin's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She's in room 207. Second floor, corner window. Griffin stared at the message, confused. Then his phone rang. It's Orson, the photographer said. I'm in the building across the street, third floor. I can see into their meeting room. What are you doing there? Following a hunch. After you left this morning, I did some research on this Eagle Crest place. Turns out they've been the subject of several investigative reports in other states. I thought you might need backup. Griffin looked up at the building across from Eagle Crest and spotted a figure in one of the windows, holding what looked like a professional camera with a massive telephoto lens. What can you see? Your wife and Kessler are in what looks like a therapy session. There's a whiteboard with some kind of chart or diagram. Hold on. Let me adjust the zoom. Griffin waited, his heart pounding. Griffin, you need to see this. Kessler is showing your wife what looks like a timeline or schedule. There are dates marked with your daughter's name. Can you photograph it? Already am. But there's more. There's another person in the room, a woman in an expensive suit. She looks like a lawyer. Griffin's blood ran cold. What are they discussing? From their body language, it's serious. Your wife is taking notes, and a lawyer is pointing to documents. Griffin watched the corner window of the Eagle Crest building, wishing he could see through the tinted glass. How long have you been watching them? About 20 minutes. This is clearly a regular meeting. They all seem very comfortable with each other. Can you stay until they leave? Absolutely. This bastard Kessler has destroyed families in 3 other states. If he's targeting yours, I want documentation. Griffin spent the next hour parked across the street, photographing everyone who entered and exited the building. At 8:15, Melina and the lawyer emerged together, deep in conversation. Griffin got clear shots of both women, as well as their license plates. After they left, Kessler came outside and spoke briefly with someone on his phone. Griffin managed to photograph him as well, noting the expensive car he drove and the personalized license plate. Thinker. Griffin's phone buzzed with another text from Orson. Got everything. Meet me at Murphy's Tavern on Burnside in 20 minutes. Murphy's Tavern was the kind of dark, no-nonsense bar that attracted tradesmen and people who preferred to drink without conversation. Griffin found Orson in a corner booth. Laptop open and camera equipment spread across the table. Jesus, Griffin, what has your wife gotten involved with? Orson Webb was in his mid-50s, with the lean build of someone who spent his days climbing around construction sites, photographing architectural details. His gray hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and his hands bore the same kind of scars that came from working with tools and machinery. Show me what you got. Orson turned his laptop screen toward Griffin. The photos were incredibly clear, shot through the telephoto lens from across the street. Griffin could see Melina, Kessler, and the lawyer in what appeared to be an intensive planning session. This timeline on the whiteboard, Orson said, pointing to one of the photos. Look at the dates. Griffin squinted at the screen. The date started 3 weeks ago and extended into the future. Next to each date was a notation, some he couldn't read, but others were clear enough. Intervention begins. Emotional response monitoring, custody preparation, final implementation. The final date was circled and marked D-Day just 2 weeks away. Who's the lawyer? Griffin asked. I ran a license plate. Celeste Darnell, family law specialist. She's got a reputation for winning messy custody battles, especially when one parent has military service or psychological issues. Griffin felt sick. They're building a case against me. More than that, Orson pulled up another photo, this one showing documents spread across the table. Look at this. Griffin could make out portions of official-looking paperwork, medical records, psychological evaluations, court forms. They've been planning this for weeks, maybe months, Orson said. This isn't about therapy or helping your daughter. This is about taking her away from you. How? My guess. They're going to claim you're an unfit parent. Military PTSD, unstable emotional state, possibly violent tendencies. Meanwhile, they've been systematically undermining your daughter's attachment to you. Griffin thought about the smoothie poisoning, Juniper's recent withdrawal, her fear of going home with her mother. The poisoning wasn't meant to hurt her permanently. It was meant to make her afraid and confused, so she'd seem traumatized when they evaluate her. Exactly. And if a child appears traumatized and says she's afraid of her father, what judge is going to award him custody? Griffin stared at the photos, rage building in his chest. I need to stop this. How? You go to the police with what we have, and Kessler's lawyers will claim it's a father's desperate attempt to avoid losing custody. They'll say you're stalking your wife and making up conspiracy theories. Then what do? Orson was quiet for a moment, studying the photos on his laptop. We need them to incriminate themselves. Get them on record discussing their real plans. How? I don't know yet, but I know someone who might help us figure it out. Griffin raised an eyebrow. Kendra, you said she's a scientist, right? Scientists are good at designing experiments. We need to design an experiment that exposes the truth. Griffin's phone buzzed with a text from Melina, working late again. Don't wait up. According to the monitoring software, she was still at Eagle Crest. They're not done yet, Griffin said. Want to go back and see what else we can document. Orson grinned and started packing up his camera equipment. Thought you'd never ask. The envelope arrived by courier at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. Griffin was in his workshop, pretending to focus on a custom gate project while actually monitoring Melina's digital communications. The doorbell rang, and he found a woman in a business suit holding a thick manila envelope. Griffin Callahan, that's me. You're being served. Have a good day. Griffin's hands shook as he opened the envelope and read the documents inside. Emergency motion for sole custody. Temporary restraining order. Psychological evaluation order. Child endangerment allegations. The papers painted a picture of Griffin as an unstable veteran with PTSD who posed a danger to his daughter. According to the filing, Juniper had been exhibiting signs of trauma and fear around her father, including mysterious illness episodes that medical professionals couldn't explain. Griffin's phone rang. Clay Buchanan's gravelly voice cut straight to the point. Griffin, I just got a call from the court. We have a problem. I'm holding it in my hands. Can you be in my office in an hour? And bring whatever evidence you've collected. Clay Buchanan's law office occupied the second floor of a converted warehouse in southeast Portland. The space felt more like a construction site than a legal practice, with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. Clay himself looked like he'd stepped out of a Western weathered face, white mustache, and a rumpled suit that had seen better decades. "This is sophisticated work," Clay said, spreading the court documents across his desk. "Celeste Arnell doesn't file frivolous motions. She's building a cage out of paper cuts we bleed one document at a time." Griffin slumped in the leather chair across from Clay's desk. "How bad is it?" "Bad. They have medical records showing Juniper's recent health problems, school reports about her behavioral changes, and they're demanding a psychological evaluation that will focus on your military service and PTSD diagnosis. But I have evidence that Melina was poisoning her. Circumstantial evidence. A smoothie with trace amounts of plant alkaloids could have a dozen innocent explanations. Meanwhile, they have official documentation and professional testimony." Griffin pulled out his phone and showed Clay the photos from Eagle Crest. "What about this?" Clay studied the images for several minutes. "It's suspicious but not illegal. A mother seeking therapy for her child and consulting with lawyers about custody isn't criminal behavior, even when the therapist is unlicensed and has a history of manipulating families. We can use that to undermine their credibility, but it won't stop the immediate custody motion." Clay leaned back in his chair. "Griffin, I need to ask you something, and I need a straight answer. Is there any truth to their allegations about your mental state? I have PTSD from my military service. I take medication and see a therapist. I've never been violent toward Juniper or Melina. Any incidents they could point to? Arguments, raised voices, anything that could be interpreted as threatening behavior?" Griffin thought back over the past few months. "Nothing significant. Melina and I haven't been getting along well, but we've been careful not to fight in front of Juniper. What about your reaction to stress? Have you had any episodes where you might have seemed unstable? The night I found out about the poisoning, I was pretty shaken up, but I handled it by getting Juniper to safety and gathering evidence." Clay nodded. "That's actually good. Shows clear thinking and protective instincts." He picked up the court documents again. "Here's what's going to happen. We have a hearing scheduled for Thursday morning. The judge will decide whether to grant the temporary custody order and restraining order. What are my chances? Honestly, not great. Family court judges err on the side of caution when it comes to children's safety. If there's any doubt about your stability, they'll place Juniper with Melina pending a full investigation." Griffin felt the walls closing in. "So what do? We fight, but we need something stronger than suspicions and circumstantial evidence. We need proof of their conspiracy. How do I get that?" Clay was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at the Portland skyline. "Sometimes the only way to catch someone in a lie is to give them enough rope to hang themselves." "What does that mean?" "It means we set a trap, something that forces them to reveal their true intentions." Griffin's phone buzzed with a text from Darla. "Juniper's asking when she can come home. What should I tell her?" Griffin showed the message to Clay. "Tell her she's staying put for now," Clay said. "And Griffin, don't contact Melina directly. Don't go to the house. Don't do anything that could be construed as violating the restraining order, even though it hasn't been granted yet. I'm supposed to just sit here and do nothing while they destroy my family? No, you're going to help me build a case that exposes the truth." Clay stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. "But we're going to do it legally and carefully. One mistake and we lose everything." As Griffin left Clay's office, his phone rang. Kendra's voice was tight with anger. "Griffin, I just got a call from someone claiming to be your wife's lawyer. She's demanding that I turn over all test results and notes related to the smoothie analysis." "What'd you tell her?" "That she could go to hell." "But Griffin, they know about the testing. Someone told them." Griffin's mind raced. How could they know about Kendra's analysis? He'd been careful to keep that information private, unless they'd been monitoring his communications the same way he'd been monitoring theirs. "Kendra, I need you to secure all your data. Make copies and store them somewhere safe." "Already done." "But Griffin, this means they're preparing for a fight. They wouldn't be trying to suppress evidence unless they were worried about it. Clay says we need proof of their conspiracy, something that shows their real intentions." What kind of proof? Griffin thought about Orson's suggestion, designing an experiment to expose the truth. I think I have an idea, but I'm going to need your help. Whatever you need. How would you feel about helping me fake a kidnapping? The cabin sat on 23 acres of dense forest in the Umpqua National Forest, 2 hours south of Portland. Orson had bought the property 5 years ago as a photography retreat, and the isolated location made it perfect for Griffin's plan. You sure about this? Kendra asked as they walked the perimeter of the cabin on Tuesday evening. If this goes wrong, we could all end up in prison. It won't go wrong, Griffin said, though he wasn't entirely convinced himself. Melina thinks Juniper is safe at Darla's ranch. When she gets a call saying Juniper's been taken, her first instinct will be to contact whoever's been helping her plan this custody battle. Orson emerged from the cabin, carrying a small device that looked like a smoke detector. Audio surveillance is in place. Every word spoken in that cabin will be recorded from multiple angles. What about video? Griffin asked. Hidden cameras in the main room, bedroom, and kitchen. Battery-powered, motion-activated. Even if they find some of them, they won't find them all. Griffin studied the cabin, trying to imagine the scene that would play out here tomorrow night. Darla's going to call Melina at exactly 6 p.m. and tell her that Juniper disappeared from the ranch. She'll say she found signs of a struggle and that someone left a note demanding ransom. And the note will give this address, Kendra added. Right? Melina will panic and drive here alone, just like we want. What if she calls the police instead? Orson asked. She won't. Not immediately. If she's been working with Kessler to build a custody case, the last thing she'll want is law enforcement investigating Juniper's disappearance. Too many questions about why Juniper was at the ranch in the first place. Griffin's phone buzzed with a text from Clay. Hearing moved to Friday morning. Gives us an extra day. Griffin showed the message to the others. Perfect timing. The next evening, Griffin sat in the cabin's main room while Kendra and Orson monitored the surveillance equipment from a concealed position in the woods. At exactly 6 p.m., Griffin's phone rang. It's done, Darla said. She bought it completely, went into full panic mode, and said she was driving down immediately. How did she sound? Terrified, but also angry, like this was somehow your fault. Did she mention calling anyone else? She said she needed to make some calls first, then she'd drive down. Griffin, I feel terrible lying to her like this. I know, but if we're right about what she's been doing to Juniper, this is the only way to prove it. Griffin hung up and settled in to wait. According to GPS tracking, Melina's phone was heading south on I-5. She would arrive at the cabin in approximately 90 minutes. At T7:45 p.m., Griffin heard a car door slam outside. He positioned himself near the window, where he could see Melina approaching the cabin. She looked frantic, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and her movements jerky with stress. Griffin opened the cabin door before she could knock. Where is she? Melina demanded, pushing past him into the cabin. Safe. For now. Melina spun around to face him, her eyes wild. Griffin, what the hell is going on? Darla said someone took Juniper from the ranch. Someone did. Me. The confusion on Melina's face was genuine. What are you talking about? I know about the smoothies, Melina. I know about Kessler and the therapy sessions. I know about the custody battle you've been planning. Melina's expression shifted from confusion to fear. I don't know what you mean. Atropine and digitalis. That's what you've been putting in Juniper smoothies. Now Melina's face went white. She sank into one of the cabin's chairs, her hands shaking. How did you find out? Does it matter? The question is why. Why would you poison our daughter? For a long moment, Melina just stared at the floor. Then she looked up at Griffin, and her expression had changed completely. The fear was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. She was becoming too attached to you, Melina said quietly. Dr. Kessler helped me understand that Juniper's dependency on you was unhealthy. It was making her weak. Griffin felt his stomach drop. Weak. Children need to learn independence, Griffin. They need to understand that emotional attachments are temporary and often destructive. My father was weak, always seeking approval and affection. It destroyed him. So you decided to poison her. The medications weren't meant to hurt her permanently. They were meant to create distance, to help her understand that people can't always be trusted to take care of you. Griffin stared at his wife, seeing a stranger. You made her sick on purpose. You made her afraid. I made her stronger. Melina's voice was gaining confidence now, as if she was reciting a well-rehearsed argument. Dr. Kessler explained how generational trauma patterns repeat themselves. Juniper was showing signs of the same emotional dependency that destroyed my family. She's 10 years old, Melina. She's supposed to depend on her parents. That's exactly the kind of thinking that perpetuates the cycle. Melina stood up and began pacing the small cabin. Dr. Kessler has helped dozens of families break these patterns. Children who learn emotional independence early become stronger, more successful adults. And if that didn't work, you were going to take her away from me completely. Melina paused in her pacing. How do you know about that? Griffin pulled out his phone and showed her one of Orson's photos from Eagle Crest. I know about Celeste Arnell. I know about the custody battle you've been planning. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting my daughter. From what? From learning to be independent? From breaking free of unhealthy attachment patterns? Griffin couldn't believe what he was hearing. Melina, listen to yourself. You're talking about our daughter like she's a psychological experiment. Maybe she is. Melina's voice was getting louder now, more agitated. Maybe that's what it takes to break the cycle. My father spent his whole life seeking validation from others. He died broke and alone because he never learned to rely on himself. So you decided to emotionally abuse Juniper to prevent her from becoming like your father. It's not abuse, it's preparation. Dr. Kessler explained. Dr. Kessler is a fraud. Griffin shouted. His license was revoked for manipulating vulnerable patients. That's not true. I have the documentation, Melina. He's been running illegal therapy practices in multiple states. For the first time since arriving at the cabin, Melina looked uncertain. You're lying. Griffin pulled up the research on his phone and showed her the California Licensing Board documents, the news articles about Kessler's previous victims, the testimonials from families he destroyed. Melina read for several minutes, her face growing paler with each new revelation. This is all fabricated, she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. Call him, Griffin said. Ask him about California. Ask him about his license. I don't need to call him. I know Dr. Kessler is helping us. Helping you do what exactly? What was the end goal, Melina? Melina was quiet for a long moment, staring out the cabin window at the darkening forest. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. The custody hearing is Friday. Celeste said if we could demonstrate that Juniper was afraid of you and showing signs of trauma, the judge would grant me sole custody. And then what? Then Dr. Kessler would continue working with Juniper to complete her emotional restructuring. Within 6 months, she would be completely independent and self-reliant. Griffin felt sick. You were going to cut me out of her life completely. You're part of the problem, Griffin. Your emotional availability makes it harder for Juniper to develop independence. My emotional availability? I'm her father. Exactly. Fathers who are too emotionally involved create daughters who become dependent on male approval for the rest of their lives. Griffin stared at Melina, finally understanding the full scope of what Kessler had done to her. He convinced you that loving our daughter was harmful to her. Love can be harmful if it's not properly structured. Jesus Christ, Melina. Do you hear yourself? I hear myself trying to protect our daughter from repeating my family's mistakes. Griffin walked to the cabin's fireplace and leaned against the mantel, trying to process everything Melina had just confessed. In the hidden microphones, every word was being recorded. The cameras were capturing her admission that she deliberately poisoned Juniper and conspired to steal custody based on fabricated evidence. Where is Juniper now? Melina asked. Somewhere safe. Griffin, this has gone far enough. Whatever game you're playing, it needs to stop. The only game that's stopping is yours. Griffin turned to face her. Tomorrow morning, I'm taking these recordings to the police and to Clay Buchanan. The custody hearing will expose everything you and Kessler have been doing. Melina's composure finally cracked. You can't do that. You don't understand what you're destroying. I'm destroying a conspiracy to abuse my daughter. You're destroying her chance at emotional independence. No, Melina, I'm saving her from you. The silence that followed was broken only by the wind in the trees outside. Melina sat back down, her head in her hands. Dr. Kessler said this might happen, she said quietly. He said you might try to interfere with the process. What did he tell you to do if that happened? Melina looked up at Griffin, and for a moment he saw a flicker of the woman he'd married 10 years ago. He said some fathers can't be saved, that they're too emotionally damaged to see what's best for their children, and that sometimes the only option is complete separation. Griffin felt a chill run down his spine. What does that mean? It means if you try to expose Dr. Kessler's work, you'll lose everything. Celeste has documented evidence of your instability, your PTSD episodes, your inability to provide stable care for Juniper. Evidence you and Kessler fabricated. Evidence that will hold up in court. Melina stood up again, her composure returning. Griffin, you can make this easy or difficult. But either way, Juniper is going to complete her emotional restructuring. Over my dead body. Melina stared at him for a long moment. If necessary. The conversation was over. Griffin had everything he needed. Get out, he said quietly. What about Juniper? You'll see her at the custody hearing, with a judge, lawyers, and court officers present. Melina walked to the cabin door, then turned back. You're making a mistake, Griffin. Dr. Kessler's methods work. Juniper could have been free from the emotional weaknesses that destroyed my father. Instead, she'll be free from you. After Melina left, Griffin sat in the silent cabin for nearly an hour, processing what he'd just heard. His wife had been systematically poisoning their daughter as part of a psychological experiment designed by a con man who preyed on parental fears and insecurities. Griffin's phone buzzed with a text from Kendra. We got everything. Every word, every confession. She's finished. Griffin looked around the cabin one last time, then walked outside to meet his allies in the woods. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. The Multnomah County Courthouse buzzed with morning activity as Griffin walked through the metal detectors at 8:30 a.m. on Friday. Clay Buchanan waited near the family court elevators, a leather briefcase in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. You ready for this? Clay asked as they rode the elevator to the 4th floor. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, let me do the talking. Celeste Darnell is going to try to provoke you into an emotional outburst. Don't give her the satisfaction. The courtroom was smaller than Griffin had expected, with wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting that gave everything a harsh, institutional feel. Melina sat at the opposing table with Celeste Darnell, a woman in her late 40s with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp suit that cost more than Griffin made in a month. Judge Patricia Chun presided from the bench, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd been handling family court cases for over 20 years. Griffin had researched her background. She was known for thorough case review and zero tolerance for procedural games. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Chun presiding in the matter of Callahan versus Callahan. Emergency custody motion. Judge Chun settled into her chair and opened the case file. Counselor Darnell, you filed an emergency motion for sole custody based on allegations of child endangerment and parental instability. Please proceed. Celeste Darnell stood and buttoned her jacket, every movement calculated for effect. Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Melina Callahan, seeks emergency custody of the couple's 10-year-old daughter due to serious concerns about Mr. Callahan's mental state and his impact on the child's well-being. Griffin watched Melina as Darnell spoke. His wife sat perfectly still, her expression composed and professional. She looked like the victim of domestic instability, not its architect. Over the past month, Darnell continued, the child has exhibited concerning symptoms, including mysterious illness episodes, behavioral changes at school, and expressed fear about returning home to her father. Darnell presented a stack of documents, medical records from Juniper's hospital visit, reports from Ms. Monroe about Juniper's anxiety at school, and psychological evaluations that painted Griffin as an unstable veteran struggling with PTSD. Mr. Callahan's military service, while commendable, has left him with documented psychological trauma that affects his parenting capacity. The child's recent health crises coincide with increased stress in the household caused by Mr. Callahan's erratic behavior. Griffin's hands clenched under the table, but he forced himself to remain calm. Furthermore, Darnell continued, Mr. Callahan recently engaged in concerning behavior by removing the child from the family home without consultation and placing her with relatives in an isolated location. This pattern of unilateral decision-making demonstrates his inability to co-parent effectively. Judge Chun listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in the file. Your Honor, Mrs. Callahan seeks sole custody to protect her daughter from further psychological harm and to provide the stable environment necessary for recovery from recent trauma. Darnell sat down, and Judge Chun turned to Clay. Mr. Buchanan, your response? Clay stood slowly, his rumpled suit and weathered appearance contrasting sharply with Darnell's polished presentation. Your Honor, the petitioner's motion is based on fabricated evidence and deliberately misleading characterizations of my client's actions. Clay walked to a table where Kendra and Orson sat in the gallery, returning with a box of documents and recording equipment. Mr. Callahan didn't remove his daughter from the home because of erratic behavior. He removed her because he discovered evidence that Mrs. Callahan had been systematically poisoning the child. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Melina's composed expression flickered for just a moment. That's a serious allegation, Mr. Buchanan, Judge Chin said. I trust you have evidence to support it. I do, Your Honor. Clay placed Kendra's lab results on the judge's bench. These are laboratory analyses of beverages Mrs. Callahan was giving to the child daily. The samples contain atropine and digitalis plant-based alkaloids that cause exactly the symptoms the child experienced at school and in the hospital. Judge Chun studied the lab reports while Darnell rose from her seat. Objection, Your Honor. These alleged test results are inadmissible. They were obtained without proper chain of custody and performed by an unlicensed laboratory. Dr. Kendra Moss is a licensed microbiologist with 15 years of experience, Clay responded. Her laboratory is certified by the state of Oregon for toxicological analysis. Your Honor, Darnell pressed, even if these results are accurate, they prove nothing about my client's involvement. The child could have been exposed to these substances anywhere. Clay smiled. That might be true, counselor, if we didn't have Mrs. Callahan's recorded confession. The courtroom fell silent. Griffin watched Melina's face go pale. Mr. Buchanan, Judge Chun said carefully, are you claiming to have a recording of Mrs. Callahan confessing to poisoning her daughter? Yes, Your Honor. And much more. Clay set up a portable speaker system and inserted a flash drive. Your Honor, this recording was made 2 days ago when Mrs. Callahan voluntarily came to a private location believing her daughter was in danger. Mr. Callahan confronted her with evidence of the poisoning, and Mrs. Callahan admitted not only to the deliberate administration of toxic substances, but also to a broader conspiracy involving an unlicensed therapist and fabricated evidence for this custody battle. I object. Darnell stood up sharply. This recording was made without my client's knowledge or consent. It's inadmissible under Oregon privacy laws. The recording was made on private property with the knowledge and consent of all parties present, Clay replied. Mrs. Callahan was not under arrest or in custody, and she was free to leave at any time. Judge Chun considered both arguments. I'll allow the recording for review, but I reserve the right to exclude portions that violate privacy statutes. Proceed, Mr. Buchanan. Clay pressed play, and Melina's voice filled the courtroom. The medications weren't meant to hurt her permanently. They were meant to create distance, to help her understand that people can't always be trusted to take care of you. Griffin watched the judge's expression change as the recording continued. Melina's casual discussion of poisoning Juniper, her collaboration with Dr. Kessler, and her plans to fabricate evidence for the custody battle painted a picture of calculated child abuse disguised as therapeutic intervention. The most damning moment came when Melina admitted to the custody conspiracy. The custody hearing is Friday. Celeste said if we could demonstrate that Juniper was afraid of you and showing signs of trauma, the judge would grant me sole custody. When the recording ended, the courtroom was dead silent. Judge Chun stared at the papers in front of her for nearly a minute before looking up. Ms. Darnell, would you like to present any response to this evidence? Celeste Darnell looked like she'd been hit with a sledgehammer. She glanced at Melina, who sat frozen in her chair, then back at the judge. Your Honor, my client was clearly under duress during this conversation. The statements were coerced and taken out of context. Ms. Darnell, I've just listened to your client calmly and systematically describe a months-long campaign to poison her daughter and fabricate evidence for this custody proceeding. Which part of that was taken out of context? Darnell had no answer. Judge Chin closed the case file and folded her hands. Mrs. Callahan, please stand. Melina rose slowly, her professional composure finally cracking. Mrs. Callahan, based on the evidence presented today, I am immediately granting sole custody of Juniper Callahan to her father, Griffin Callahan. Furthermore, I am ordering that you have no unsupervised contact with the child pending a full criminal investigation into the allegations of child endangerment and conspiracy. Melina swayed slightly, gripping the table for support. Mr. Callahan, Judge Chun continued, you are awarded full legal and physical custody of your daughter, with Mrs. Callahan granted supervised visitation only upon completion of court-ordered psychological evaluation and treatment. Judge Chin's gaze moved to the prosecution table, where a district attorney's representative had been quietly taking notes throughout the hearing. I am also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges related to child endangerment, conspiracy, and perjury. A warrant will be issued for the arrest of Dr. Ravlin Kessler for practicing psychology without a license and conspiracy to commit child abuse. Griffin felt a wave of relief wash over him. It was over. Court is adjourned, Judge Chin announced. Mr. Callahan, you may collect your daughter immediately. As the courtroom cleared, Griffin stood on shaking legs. Clay clapped him on the shoulder. It's done, Griffin. You got her back. Across the aisle, Celeste Darnell was speaking in urgent whispers to Melina, who seemed to be in shock. As Griffin passed their table, Melina looked up at him. Griffin, wait. He stopped, against his better judgment. This isn't how it was supposed to happen, she said quietly. Dr. Kessler said the therapy would help her become stronger. Griffin stared at his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, seeing her clearly for the first time in months. Melina, you poisoned our daughter. You made her sick and scared, so you could take her away from me. I was trying to help her. No, you were trying to break her. Griffin turned away. Don't contact us again. As Griffin left the courthouse, his phone buzzed with a text from Darla. How did it go? Griffin typed back. We won. Bring Juniper home. The news broke that evening on the local Portland stations, but by Monday morning, it had gone national. Mother faces charges in alleged emotional conditioning of daughter, ran as the headline on CNN's website, with similar coverage appearing across major news outlets. Griffin sat in his workshop Monday afternoon, trying to focus on welding a custom railing while his phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters. He'd stopped answering after the 15th request for an interview. Kendra knocked on the workshop door and let herself in. How are you holding up? Better than expected. I've had 6 reporters call the lab asking for details about the toxicology testing. I'm not talking to any of them. Griffin set down his welding torch and pulled off his mask. Any word on Melina? Orson says she was fired this morning. The tech company released a statement about conduct incompatible with corporate values or something like that. Griffin's phone rang again. This time he recognized the number Clay Buchanan. Griffin, you need to see the news. They got Kessler. Griffin pulled up the local news website on his laptop. The headline read, Unlicensed Therapist Arrested at Canadian Border. The article detailed how Dr. Ravlin Kessler had been arrested at the Peace Arch border crossing, trying to enter Canada. Border agents found multiple false identification documents in his car, along with a laptop containing what prosecutors described as extensive documentation of psychological manipulation techniques used on vulnerable families. The laptop is the real gold mine, Clay continued over the phone. FBI computer forensics found detailed case files on dozens of families Kessler had been working with. It's a complete record of his methods. How bad is it? Bad enough that the FBI is opening a federal investigation into his activities across multiple states. Griffin, you weren't his only victims. There are families in California, Nevada, and Washington who went through similar experiences. Griffin felt sick thinking about other children who might have suffered the same treatment as Juniper. There's more, Clay said. One of the case files contains detailed communications between Kessler and Molina going back 6 months. It documents the entire progression from initial consultation to the poisoning protocol to the custody battle strategy. 6 months. Molina has been planning this since before Christmas. The whole thing was premeditated. Griffin closed the laptop and walked to the workshop window. Through the glass, he could see the house where he'd lived with Molina for 7 years, where they brought Juniper home as a baby, where he'd thought they were building a family. What happens to Molina now? She's been charged with child endangerment, conspiracy, and perjury. If convicted, she's looking at 5 to 10 years in prison. And Juniper comes home to her father, where she belongs. That evening, Griffin drove out to Darla's ranch to collect his daughter. He found her in the barn, brushing one of the horses under Darla's watchful supervision. "Dad!" Juniper ran to him, and Griffin caught her in a hug that felt like coming home. "Hey, kiddo, ready to come back to the house? Are we going to be okay now?" Griffin looked into his daughter's eyes, seeing traces of the fear and confusion that had marked the past few months. But he also saw resilience, strength, and the kind of trust that Kessler and Molina had tried so hard to destroy. "Yeah, sweetheart, we're going to be okay." Darla appeared beside them, hay in her hair and a satisfied expression on her weathered face. "About time you two got back together. Thanks for everything, Darla. I know it wasn't easy. Wasn't easy watching what that woman was doing to this little girl either." Darla ruffled Juniper's hair. "You take care of your dad, you hear? He's been through hell to get you back." On the drive home, Juniper was quiet for most of the trip. As they pulled into their driveway, she finally spoke. "Dad, is Mom going to jail?" Griffin had been dreading this question. "Probably, sweetheart. She made some very bad choices that hurt you. Was she trying to make me not love you anymore?" The directness of the question hit Griffin like a punch to the chest. "I think so, yes. It didn't work." Griffin reached over and squeezed his daughter's hand. "No, kiddo, it didn't work." 1 year later, Griffin stood on the front porch of Darla's ranch house, watching Juniper chase chickens around the yard while 3 horses grazed peacefully in the near pasture. The morning air carried the scent of hay and coffee, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Griffin felt truly at peace. "Coffee's ready," Darla called from the kitchen. Griffin found his sister at the stove, flipping pancakes with the same efficiency she'd once used to manage emergency room chaos. At 56, she'd settled into ranch life like she'd been born to it, though Griffin suspected she missed the adrenaline of medical work more than she let on. "Sleep okay?" she asked. "Better than I have in months." Griffin and Juniper had been living at the ranch for 8 months now, ever since Griffin sold the house in Portland and relocated his metalworking business to a workshop he'd built on Darla's property. The change had been good for both of them. Juniper thrived in the open space and routine of ranch life, while Griffin found satisfaction in the physical work of maintaining the property alongside his custom fabrication projects. "Any word from your lawyer about the divorce?" Darla asked. "Should be final next month." Molina signed all the papers from prison. "Good riddance." Griffin poured himself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching Juniper through the window. The past year had brought remarkable changes in his daughter. The anxiety and confusion that had marked her final months with Molina had gradually faded, replaced by the confident curiosity of a healthy 11-year-old. She'd made friends at the local school, learned to ride horses, and developed a passion for helping Darla with veterinary care for the animals. "Dad!" Juniper burst through the kitchen door, holding something in her cupped hands. "Look what I found." She opened her hands to reveal a painted wooden gear, clearly handmade and decorated with bright primary colors. "Where did you find that?" Griffin asked. "In the barn, behind the tool bench. I think it fell off one of your projects." Griffin examined the gear more closely. It was one of his early attempts at combining metalwork with woodworking, made shortly after they'd moved to the ranch. He'd been experimenting with different materials and techniques, trying to find new directions for his craft. "Can we fix it?" Juniper asked. "It looks like it belongs to something bigger." Griffin smiled. "I think we can figure something out." Want to help me in the workshop after breakfast? Yes. As they ate pancakes and planned their workshop project, Griffin reflected on how much their lives had changed. The house in Portland had sold quickly, providing enough money to build a comfortable addition to Darla's ranch house and establish Griffin's new workshop. His business had actually grown since the move. Custom metalwork was in high demand among the wealthy landowners in the area, and Griffin's reputation for quality craftsmanship had spread through word of mouth. More importantly, he'd found peace in the rhythm of ranch life. There were horses to feed, fences to mend, and always some project that needed his metalworking skills. The work was honest and satisfying in a way his old life had never been. "Mr. Callahan," a voice called from the front porch. Griffin looked up to see a young man in a postal service uniform standing at the front door. "Certified letter," the postman said, holding out an envelope. "Need you to sign for it." Griffin's stomach tightened as he recognized the return address, the Oregon State Penitentiary, where Melina was serving her sentence. "What is it, Dad?" Juniper asked. "Just paperwork, sweetheart. Keep eating your breakfast." Griffin signed for the letter and carried it to his workshop behind the house. The familiar space, filled with the tools and materials of his trade, felt like a sanctuary. He designed the workshop to be both functional and peaceful, with large windows that looked out over the pastures and mountains beyond. The letter was brief. "Griffin, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I understand now what Dr. Kessler did to me. The prison therapist has helped me see how he manipulated my fears about my father's weaknesses and convinced me that I needed to protect Juniper from emotional dependency, that I was wrong. What I did to her, to both of you, was inexcusable. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm getting the help I need to understand how I allowed myself to be convinced that hurting my daughter was somehow helping her. Please tell Juniper that I love her and that none of what happened was her fault. She deserves to grow up knowing that she is loved for exactly who she is. I won't contact you again." Melina Griffin read the letter twice, then walked to the workshop's wood-burning stove. He struck a match and held it to the corner of the paper, watching the flames curl around Melina's words. Some bridges were never meant to hold weight. As the letter burned to ash, Griffin heard Juniper's laughter from the yard. Through the workshop window, he could see her running toward the building, the painted wooden gear clutched in her hand. "Dad, are you ready to fix this?" Griffin swept the ashes into the stove and turned to greet his daughter. "Absolutely. Let's see what we can build together." Juniper held up the gear, examining it in the workshop's bright light. "I think it's going to be part of something really cool." Griffin lifted his daughter and set her on the workbench, then picked up his tools. Outside, the horses grazed peacefully in the afternoon sun, and the mountains stretched endlessly toward the horizon. "Dad, we fixed it," Juniper said as they worked together, her small hands guiding the pieces while Griffin's experience shaped them into something new. For the first time in years, Griffin smiled with genuine happiness. They had indeed fixed it, not just the wooden gear, but something much more important. They had built a life based on trust, honesty, and the kind of love that made children stronger rather than breaking them down. "Yes, kiddo," Griffin said, hugging his daughter close. "We fixed it.